Today I'm going to be sharing from Josh Korda. He has a podcast, or it's called Dharma Punx, and an in-person meeting that used to happen in Brooklyn, New York, and in Greenpoint. But I'm not sure it continued during coronavirus pandemic, but he did always save his videos with recordings. So anyway, the theme is stop making sense. When we retrieve the felt sense experience before we go all up in conceptualization and meaning making, which is the goal, we have the opportunity to, one, reduce and label, or two, to feel emotionally. It's an art. It's an art. In other words, the analysis evacuates and destroys. It digs for subtext. It's like cutting open. What's in there? What's the essence? And interpretation demonstrates a dissatisfaction with the art, and a wish to replace it with something else that we decided is meaningful. So life is like this art that we're looking at. We keep trying to either cut into it, which evacuates its form to try to make it be or see what we think it should be, versus feeling the emotional experience, actually being with the energy that is art making. When we there's something called formalism, which is when we appreciate how it's put together, its form, the experience, the beauty, versus this sort of, sometimes it could be called masculine, toxic masculinity, but here I'm not using that word. It's a one-track mindedness, an overly focused attempt to find the message and the lesson and get exactly what it's meant for, and has to be purposeful and useful right now. So this is about the practice of stop making sense. So we can let art or life or relationship transform us and echo in us by opening to it. So we become transformed by its form. Insanity is an escape from impossible situations. Why am I saying that? Because when we have something called cognitive overload, cognition overloaded, there's a rush to judge, to diminish. It diminishes our ability to diminish it to what we can know. It's one-track mind. It's called toxic masculinity, but in this case, I'm saying it's this neutral ability to make meaning. It's meaning making, and it's this. It's nice when everybody can have their own meaning from everything, and there isn't somebody who thinks that they know what the worth is or the meaning is, like it's only one. That doesn't allow for savoring. So art is an example, but it could be food, it could be nature. It could be any experience. The ability to savor it is diminished when we're, what basically processing doesn't mean we're explaining, summarizing, or trying to label. It is allowing the emotional impact to occur. In that way, like he said, echo in us. It's because we open. So trusting our emotional life to impart the real lessons that will, one, integrate over time, and two, cause us to take adaptive action. What does this really mean? It can be something like, in practical terms, setting a boundary. The integration of the emotion will allow us to know, I get overwhelmed when I'm out for 5 hours and then I can't handle it, or if I'm healing but I'm very stubborn, I may not be able to do something I wanted to do. And then also grieve, like, oh, well, I want to have this new value and I like to be modest in such way, but it means I won't be able to enjoy that thing from before. But we can't do that if we're so busy trying to label and meaning make, and right away, even, for example, find the silver lining. We actually have to feel it's not a suppressing or a repressing of pain. I mean, there could be gut-wrenching pain, but that is, in other words, that's all. Okay, so two things. One is the emotional learning from these experiences is evolutionarily reinforced. So it's not about taking it away, it's about evolution, I'm not talking about evolution from the species, I'm talking about personal evolution. Emotional learning is personally reinforced by our ability to adapt. Because with our emotions, we learn about our boundaries and about our losses. Like I mentioned, grief and boundaries. So to make this broader and then zoom in, emotional learning in a very broad way, when we learn through and from our emotional experience of life, rather than quickly trying to label and decide and kind of limit by naming, we actually have not worked with the emotion and felt the emotion in such a way that we can move past it. So the emotion has information for us. The feelings there is no need to violate our own boundaries over and over. We do need to feel the boundary so that we can match our needs, which is to set the boundary. Or, for example, we shouldn't keep clinging and attaching to something that's going to disappear, in which case we need to learn to grieve. So it teaches us. It's going to be a reinforced experience, even if we avoid it. So we cannot think that by suppressing or repressing this gut-wrenching, if it is gut-wrenching pain or any kind of pain or emotional, because the amazing emotions, will reject them and suppress them and repress them too. No one really complains, I don't have, a vessel for joy. I don't have a vessel for love. But it's because we may not be emotionally adapting that we cannot be transformed by our love or by our joy. So if there is too much pain that's there to guide us and help us, that we are over and we're not fully feeling it, and we're overly intellectualizing it and thinking that, I want to say things like we're being tested by the creator of the emotion rather than just feeling the emotion, or feeling there's a reward or punishment that comes through as an emotion. Rather, when we actually fully feel, we don't fight it, we just feel it, this pain transforms us, it informs us, it's information, it's coming through to teach us how to live our life. And we are no match in the cognition overload to avoid the emotion. It will just cause us to continue to feel overloaded, and we will be unable to process because we might be addicted to explaining, summarizing, labeling. So emotional impulse, it takes 1/10 of a second to arise, and the cognitive thoughts take half a second to arise. So in other words, when we're trying to think our way and make sense and know, it's like using a pencil sharp. It's like using, how do I say this? It's like using a pencil to, write on a chalkboard. You're just not going to see it. So it's already been changed. But on the other hand, we can use lesson finding as a coping skill. But if we're trying to sharpen a pencil with a sword, right, it's not going to work either. So it's not one way or the other. It's not saying that our cognitive thoughts are useless or that we shouldn't understand what's happening, but it's saying that fully feeling has to come first. We can only make meaning once we are fully felt. Then we can respond. Then we can take adaptive action. So there's a trust here that the emotions are not here to hurt us. We're supposed to allow them to echo in our openness, and then they integrate over time. Then we take adaptive actions based on that. So it's worth noticing that when we overestimate the mental beliefs' ability to steer inclinations and behavior versus the pure felt energy, it's like I said, it's like trying to use a pencil on a chalkboard, or you might want to say it's like using I don't like the idea of the sword with the pencil, but what I'm trying to say with that is because the mind in this case as a sword, we're trying to get to the tip of the pencil, but in this case the emotion is the larger experience. So it's kind of like saying that we're using if let's say you have a huge sword and you're using a little tiny knife sharpener, you're trying to sharpen get things to make sense, but it's a huge sword. Allow it to be what it is. And not saying that we need to allow a sword to cut us all up inside. But the trust here is that if we use lesson finding as a coping skill for control and safety, the language of the inner chatter doesn't actually change any patterns. It's not effective or efficient. And so that's what I'm saying. It's not efficient to use kind of like I have a good one. Instead of a sword, let me scratch that and say a peeler. It's not efficient to use a peeler to cut a big stack of wood. You need a sword for that. So that's just an example. I don't want to get caught up in the analogy. I didn't do such a good job at that, but I think the message is there. And it can echo in you, whoever you are. So language of inner chatter doesn't actually change effectively or efficiently patterns. We actually learn from our intellectualizing experience over time. It takes a lot of time to actually intellectually understand our patterns and our emotions. And collaborative efforts with others help the most. It's about vulnerability and bouncing, the ideas. And what did I do? I did a personal practice, which I'll share here. Well, first let me finish what he said, but after that I'm going to share personal practice, because how do we actually feel the emotions? I went and I felt, some information, and then I found more out about myself. So when we're bouncing back and forth with others, we get clarity, we get change. You can't do that if you're flying off the charts of your emotional ability, because you're not feeling your emotions and you're actually trying to narrow. People are experiencing emotions. They're not going to respond well when you're trying to overanalyze and cut in, and like it's this one-track mind of reducing everything to something that can be understood by the mind. The most effective way is to turn away from the need to figure it all out and to stop being addicted to making sense of everything. And we can kind of summarize all this in the bigger picture again, as right brain is called gestalt, or the wholeness, the visceral, the unconscious, the beingness. And left brain is the words and the concepts and the categories, separate. One is not two because there's a line between them. This is more left brain. This is the conscious. So 3 types of pain and suffering that's talked about in Buddhism, but I want to share this anyway. 1 is painful pain. It's painful. 2 is the pain of change, which is impermanence or transitoriness. It's the feeling of when the umbilical cord is cut, or when things are lost. There's not really any pain coming in. We're not being stabbed or broken or burnt, but we're not super hungry, but there's this sense of separation. And we can't hold on to it. It just is crumbling in our hands like sand. And the 3rd is a empty, hollow life, which is on the inside. So it isn't, again, a sensation of pain, and it isn't a loss on the outside, but it's a sense of not being a self. And this is the pain of existence. And this is, again, from Buddhism, but we could say that in Torah, there's 3 pillars that hold up the world. 1 is, and I probably talked about this here, but 1 is Torah. So here we would say the Torah is to be filled up with the truth. That is probably to be existing for the sake of something that's bigger than me, that could always fill me up no matter what state I am, no matter what size vessel. Another that holds up the world is acts of goodness and kindness, including tzedakah, which is charity. And we could say that heals the pain of letting go. When we're always sharing, we can keep getting more. We don't hold on so tight. We use our hands to open for others rather than hold on tight. This is another way that we could heal the pain. And the 3rd way is the pain itself. There's something called tefillah, which is prayer. And there's many translations for it. But 1 is to actually offer up, as if it's an offering to the Creator, this pain, to fully feel. And as we just learned here, emotional impulse is very quick. It's 1/10 of a second. The cognitive thoughts are 1/2 a second. So as these emotions are bubbling in, and we sometimes have guilt, then we have shame about the guilt, then we have regret about the guilt, then we have regret about the shame about the guilt, then we have anger about the regret about the shame about the guilt, and this all happens like that. Within a minute, you could have felt such intense emotions. And it's not helpful to start naming them. It's actually important to feel them. So in prayer, we fully feel. There's another type of prayer where you go out in the wilderness and you talk in aloneness to the Creator. And these are ways that we can each, with our pain that we have no control over, we can go to the controller and the guider. So these 3 ways that we can hold up our personal, each one as a world. So these 3 types of pain and suffering, there is a coping style, and it's about exactly what Josh Korda is talking about. It's about being fully feeling. So finally, there's something called mindfulness, which in this case is being with all, even pain. Mindfulness is the mind's ability, which we cultivate, to be even with the allness, which includes those 10 emotions in a minute, and even the sense of that, the pencils, the frustration that we're trying to use our mind and it's not working. We use a pencil on a chalkboard, you can't see anything. Or we're trying to use a big bulky tool like a sword to peel an apple. Or we're trying to use a peeler to cut through a big fabric. These things are the wrong tools. So, mindfulness, the right mindfulness, and we would call this the intellect. And there are attributes in the supernal individual being of each one, all related to the primordial individual being as a human, that can handle the all. It can handle the all. And then what I did as a practice for this was I felt emotions, and my emotions were guiding me towards these types of pain. And I was feeling it as a desire to get away from pain. And so here I wrote them down. This is from about 5 years ago. This is actually within the last 5 years. I don't know exactly when, but it's within the last 5 years. First of all, I wrote a partner who gives me enough space and enough attention and balances out with me in a way we can both really enjoy the present, where we don't have to ever take it for granted. And that combines many different emotions of privacy, of dignity, of being present, of appreciation, of focus, of balance, and also of connection. So this, when we do these practices, obviously I'm writing it very quickly, but the only reason I could name it and intellectually organize it to share is because I spent so much time feeling what I needed to feel and using prayer and kindness, and of course also learning Torah, learning new information that could have the power to transform us without right away trying to always make sense of everything. Next, I wrote to have the goodwill of God revealed even more. Then I wrote to be able to be of service to help others even more. So these desires are not initially the desires I would have thought I had. I wouldn't have thought I cared that much to help everyone else. But when I wanted to feel better, I realized I wanted everyone to feel better. When I felt the terrible emotions of suffering, I didn't want anyone else to feel that. Then I wrote to never have to worry about money. I realized money's never going to make me happy. I don't even want to worry about it anymore. Then to become even less materialistic, transcendent, focused, intentional, present, sexual intimacy. This was when I started learning about how sex is so precious, the holy energy that could create a whole world, and that is the world-making power. And I realized that I have to be able to, and I wrote here both present and transcendent, because it's both a being in completely, but then also all the feelings that are bigger than one person that can only be accomplished with two people. And finally, self-actualization, which is actually my theme of today, actualization, and all my aspects, which have yet to be developed, which are creative, performative, family, and I'm still working on these. And then I wrote, in terms of, I read this actually in a book today about play transforming the energy of pain or discomfort. So I wrote here ways that I play. One is wrestling. And it's very strange, I don't remember this, but actually I had a close male friend who I had dated at some point, and we used to wrestle. And it was very exciting. And it made me feel more confident in my body and comfortable in my skin because it was safe. And actually, he was very strong, so I didn't feel like I would hurt him. And it was very healing. And then making funny voices or characters or faces. I didn't know, I totally forgot about these, but I remember loving that. Then art, I still do this all the time. I play sometimes when I'm angry and I find myself like being very aggressive with the art. And then dancing to music, I practice this every day, and I've also included singing. And then yoga, I don't mean exactly the yoga of the Western world. I mean yoga of posturing and posing into different aspects of a self that can express and that we can maintain. So if I want to be a tiger all day, no matter what happens, can I maintain my tigerness? Not literally a tiger, but just an example. Tiger's not a kosher animal, so we could say something like, if I want to be a lamb, how do I maintain being a lamb all day? But it's just about a playfulness. So I'm going to stop there, and God willing, tomorrow I will share more from Josh Korda on similar topic. Actually, no, I will not share more from Josh Korda. Oh yeah, I will. I will be sharing more from Josh Korda tomorrow on a similar topic. Thank you. Bye.